everyone back in here in one piece.
It's slippery in here.
We can't stay here! Marines, evac is ready, but you'll need to proceed to the extraction point. Weapons high! Rise, assholes! Hold tight, Marines. We're nearing your location. Marines! In here! Back it up and let's go! Marines, you're halfway to making it out of there. Hold on.
They're coming over the rail!
Multiple targets incoming.
I need 30 seconds!
Come on, move!
Although edited for television, tonight's thriller contains scenes of suspense and violence which may be unsuitable for young viewers. Parental discretion is advised.
What was your first experience with the Aliens franchise? How did you come to it? How were you first invested in this stuff?
So I saw Aliens before I saw Alien. Aliens had become a phenomenon, and I am, like many of us, the child of divorced parents because it was the 80s and that was the thing to do. And my dad was in town visiting, and he said, "Hey, kid, what do you want to do?" And I was like, "Oh, all my friends have talked about this Aliens movie. Can we go see it?" And, you know, it was rated R, so I wasn't supposed to go see it. And we did, and wow, it just blew me away. I went out and bought the, I remember when Starlog used to make those movie magazines, and it would be like specific to a particular film. I got one of those about aliens, and I got super engaged and loved it. And it wasn't until a little while later that I actually saw Alien afterwards. And I, you know, maybe this is heresy, but I was a little disappointed in Alien compared to Aliens.
It's not that unusual. In my experience with this fandom, you're one or the other. You either really favor Alien or you really favor Aliens. It doesn't mean you don't like both, potentially, but there's always one that's a clear favorite. There's very few people that are like, about the same, because it hits different buttons in the brain depending on who you are, how you're going to respond to it. And like, I'm Aliens people. That's why I have an Aliens podcast with an S at the end of it. I respect Alien people, but I'm always going to be a little bit more bro-y with my fellow Aliens fans. So I'm 100% with you on that one.
So Aliens 3, I got to mention, I don't recall if I saw it in the theater or not. I can't remember. But the reason I rushed out to watch it in 1995, which even though it came out in 92, any reason I would have adamantly rented it in 95, can you guess?
No, I'm going to let you get into that. I'm curious about this.
Because they announced in 95 that Paul McGann was going to be the new Doctor Who, which came out in 1996. So I immediately went out to try and find everything he was in, and Paul McGann was in Aliens 3, so I had to watch it.
I should have got that. If I'd had thought about it for half a second, I might have gotten that. But to be honest with you, I typically forget that he's in that movie. I'm not even sure who he plays in the movie. I focus on Charles Dance. I focus on Charles Dutton. And I know he's one of the other prisoners, but I don't have a relationship with him like you have. Like, you have the audio library of his many adventures on radio that he didn't get to have on the screen. So I know you were very invested in Paul McGann. I can recognize him. I can pick him out of a lineup as long as he's wearing the Doctor Who outfit. After that, I'm not so sure. I'm not confident.
He looks like, nowadays, he just looks like a regular guy, and he's super nice. I've had drinks with him, that kind of thing at like conventions, and he's incredible. So anyway, yes, that drove me back to Alien 3.
And your thoughts on that?
I don't remember it at all. The ones that stick in my head is Aliens 2, Alien 1, and one of the sequels where Ripley was like a clone and had the greasy hair, and the kid was running around with her. Not Newt, but was it Winona Ryder? Oh, geez. It's funny. Like, I was super into it for a brief, explosive period of time, but that was it. It was the first, Aliens, Alien, the comic books, and then I just kind of drifted away from it. I did see the first couple Alien vs. Predator movies, and I don't know if this has gone controversial opinion, but I think the second AVP movie is brilliant because they try to break every single movie-going convention. You know, you do not mess with pregnant people. You do not mess with animals. Oh, that movie did it. They didn't care.
I'm actually really looking forward to it, especially I'd always heard stuff like that about it. And doing this show, it's come up over and over again. I really feel like I'm going to be one of those guys like, oh yeah, they went there. Because what I always remember, I'm sure you remember Shocker, right? With Mitch Pileggi, the Wes Craven movie about the guy who gets electrocuted and he gets electrical powers and he's traveling through wires and stuff. Okay, apparently not. You're not a horror guy.
No, I remember it vaguely.
Vaguely, right? Yeah.
I'm not a movie guy, so.
It was actually, whenever they do those twin movie things, they never bring it up. But around the same time that Shocker came out, there was a movie called The Horror Show with Brian James, and I think Lance Henriksen was in that one. And it was basically the same premise. A guy gets electrocuted, and as a result, he gets powers, and he's able to do evil supernatural stuff and kill people and stuff, right? And one of the sequences is the guy actually takes a cleaver and chops a young girl's head off. And by young, I mean like a tween, you know? Whoa. And that movie always stuck with me because that was the first time I remember seeing a horror movie where the kid wasn't safe. And I was just like shocked. It was just complete shock to the system because you're just trained that they're not going to go there. And just the simple fact that it went there automatically made it a better movie than Shocker. Also, I'm sorry, Brian James and Lance Henriksen, that beats anything they had in Shocker on its own. Just the cast alone, right?
Sure.
So I think that I might like it, but I've also heard it's a really dark movie, not just in terms of where they go, but just literally poorly lit and hard to see. So I'm curious if that's going to have a major impact on me. But I think that the B-moviness of it is going to win me over, but I've not yet seen that movie. That's one of the only ones I haven't seen.
That's wild. I'm shocked that you haven't seen that one. Mm-hmm. It's legendary for how people react to it. So,
and it's interesting to me too because it feels like, especially since you saw it in '96, so you didn't even see it when it came out.
I may have. I just don't remember.
Right. You were a fair bit older than most of them. I'm not taking a shot at you. Don't get defensive. But you were a fair bit older when you saw it than most of the people who would have seen it that I've talked to. It wasn't as formative for you as it was for them. And it's interesting how, like, some people, it just like was dream breaking. Like, how dare they? I never forgave them. You know, it was as you would like to say, the jump the shark moment. And for you, it was just a forgettable sequel. I still love Aliens. I assume you go back to see Aliens on occasion since it's such a great flick.
Yeah, that one I've seen. Now it's probably been 10 years since I've watched it, but it is one of the. It's probably the one of the franchise I've revisited the most. That's for sure.
Yeah, it's like the sci-fi equivalent of Rocky. It's just one of those movies you watch and it just pumps you up, and you want to go out and shoot aliens after you're done with it.
Oh yeah, I showed it to my kid when he was probably 10 years old. I was like, yeah, it's time. Come on.
That's the age, absolutely.
All right, want to talk about this Borderlines thing?
Yeah, did you find it? According to Mike's Amazing World of Comic, Dark Horse Presents number 121 was released on May 14th, 1997. Other Dark Horse books released that month include the Aliens Labyrinth trade paperback, Classic Star Wars, Han Solo at Stars End number 3, the Early Adventures trade paperback of that series, Dark Horse Classics Aliens vs. Predator number 4, Dark Horse Classics Star Wars Dark Empire number 3, the 25th issue of Ghost, Predator Hell and Hot Water number 2, and Starship Troopers Insect Touch number 1. Dark Horse Presents 121 was the 227th title in sales by units, 221 by dollars, cost $2.95, shipped 6,915 copies through Diamond Comics distribution. This is all through Comicron. Publisher summary reads, Jack Zero is a legendary gunslinger immortalized in pulp magazines, but when he tells the story himself, it's clear that the truth is a lot different than the fiction that was made out of it. European performance artist Zero Boy and Eisner Award-winning artist Arnold Pander, Triple X, Rune, Grindel, collaborate on the 5-part series Jack Zero, which begins here. Meanwhile, writer Darko Macan, Star Wars, X-Wing Rogue Squadron, Grindel Tales, Devils and Deaths, and artist Tommy Lee Edwards, Helix's Gemini Blood, Batman Chronicles, craft an eerie short story of aliens, where the only things that are clearly black and white are the ink and the paper. In Aliens Borderlines, a soldier on a far outpost learns what it's like to live in the sort of fear armies inspire. He's come face to face with an alien, and he's not sure how literal a face-to-face meeting it was. And for those who are already along for the ride, we have the next installments of The Lords of Misrule by John Tomlinson and Peter Snedberg, The Dreaming, and Trout by Troy Nixie. Like everything that we're talking about, this is all stuff that was new to you, right?
Yes. Yep.
You just read Borderlands. What did you think about this tale?
I mean, I thought it was pretty good for it was a Dark Horse Presents entry. It's only a couple pages long, so it's there's not a lot of room to get too profound. I liked it better than the Gene Colan story before it, but the Gene Colan story is missing a page, I guess you're telling me. But yeah, I mean, I like that writer, Darko. I don't know how to say his last name, Macan, and
yeah, he's Croatian, so your guess is as good as anybody's, I'd say.
Yeah, I think he did a Sandman miniseries spinoff. Now that I think about it, but I know he did Hellblazer.
Yeah, Grendel Tales, I think.
Yeah, and he did Cable in the Ecstatics era, where they were doing some really gnarly stuff to the X books.
Mm-hmm. Was that in the Igor Kordy period?
Yeah, it was the same thing. Yeah. I remember thinking those were pretty good. And I liked the Tommy Lee Edwards art until I remembered that he did 1985, and then I remembered people in the shop freaking out that it was Greg Land style tracing going on, like he used like a Hulk statue for photo reference multiple times. That made everybody. I mean, I wasn't reading 1985 anyway, but
well, I was under the I didn't read 1985 either, but I was under the impression that was sort of like a biographical kind of thing anyway. I thought that was Mark Miller kind of casting himself back to that time period, so it would make sense if you were doing close referencing of stuff that they would have had, would have been in their lives.
Yeah, I mean, I think it was like I don't know. There was like a Hulk on the cover, or there was a Hulk sequence or something like that, and people were complaining about it being the same thing, the same statue, just from a different angle and light box. But yeah, I don't want to talk about 1985. But the art in this is pretty good. It doesn't seem, whatever he's doing, if it is light boxing or heavily referenced, it would make sense, because some of these things are, from our perspective, it's hard to see how you would get from nothing to there without having a reference, but it's still really clear for the most part. It's not muddy, even though there's a lot of places where it could have gone bad or could have been unclear. Storytelling is really solid, and the rendering is really crisp. I like this a lot, actually.
Yeah, the other day I did cover some of RoboCop stuff that he had done early in his career, and he wasn't really there yet. The podcast Roll Spine has been very critical of Tommy Lee Edwards over the years, particularly from like Earth X onward, where it seemed like it was just like color everything black and then throw some white out on top of it and you got a piece of artwork. This is in a nice middle place where I think he's developed enough and accomplished enough to where he can draw a proper comic book and have it be realistic without being photorealistic. Like, this looks like something you'd get at an indie motion picture or something. Things look like they're supposed to look for the most part. The aliens are not costume accurate or anything. They're more of a conception of what the aliens would be if you close your eyes and we're drawing from that. He's definitely not tracing any drawings of the aliens here, but I think that's the benefit of the book, because it's not that kind of story. It's sort of almost like a Vietnam story, World War type of era. You've got grunts in the jungle. They're being sieged by the aliens. You've got flashbacks to famine and defending supplies against people who are desperately seeking them in the midst of a famine, and the moral quandaries that come with that and what that does to a person and what they're willing to chance under those circumstances. So he's a good pick for this type of story, and it looks good. I think that it's a good quality book overall. I'm not used to being somebody who says nice things about Tommy wait a second, this one's Tommy Lee Edwards. You know what? Actually, I just realized, no, I'm getting confused. I'm thinking Tommy Lee Edwards is John Paul Leon. So I'm getting two people confused. So I was thinking of John Paul Leon. I've always tended to confuse these guys. Tommy Lee Edwards, if I remember correctly, he did, like, of all things, Secret Weapons at Valiant at one point.
Wow.
But this is some of the better stuff that I've seen him do. And I gotta say, one thing that makes the story especially inviting for me is you've got lettering from John Workman. And I'm sure most people are not thinking about, ooh, that sexy lettering, but there's something about his work, man, that makes me want to read a story just because his lettering is so appealing to me. So it might be that I'm just transfixed by the John Workman of it all to even accept Tommy Lee Edwards.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. It's great lettering, but the whole thing, it really does come together. I think it's only 8 pages, but it's very economical. They don't get too, I said, there's not a lot of room to get into the weeds with any of these ideas, but he has a flashback in there. He does like the jaggy borders on the flashback panels, which is like that visual cue that, there's been a transition, which talk about that for survival too, where there are no jaggy borders on survival panels. So you're like, what in the heck is happening on some of those transitions? But here, I think this works really well. I think the art is great. I think the story is appropriate for any other story, bleak. It doesn't have, your androids and the corporation and the female lead, but as far as an 8-page Dark Horse Presents entry, I think it's all you could ask for. Looks great. It reads great. It makes point. Got a haunting ending to it. There you go.
Well, and you do have that socio-political angle that works well with aliens. It's just a different kind of desperation that we usually see from the the aliens corporate dystopia, but not that far from some of the stuff we saw in Romulus recently. And I do wonder if maybe the Croatia of the all kind of comes into it as well. But it's the sort of thing you'd want from an 8-pager. I think it's really well executed, and it definitely it asks and answers a question. So I appreciated that.
Yeah, and I know it was 1997 or whatever that they put this out, but the modern 2024 election cycle with all the borders and the paranoia and the dehumanizing aspect of all that that's going on.
The xenomorphs, they're eating the cats, they're eating the dogs.
Right.
It's the bugs. They're not human, they're subhuman, they're bugs.
Right. But even the people, what would drive someone to be so desperate that they'd face death at your hand? What are they fleeing from that makes that acceptable risk?
Yeah, fast is better than slow. A chance is better than no chance. That's the whole point.
Yeah, it's very, like I said, in 8 pages, it's very economical. It doesn't have. I think Soldier X had some kind of not wacky, but there was a little more humor to it. I don't think there's room for the humor here. It's just the humanity and man's inhumanity to man type of thing. But I think it's good. I think it actually looked really slick. And if I was going to pick a page out of this, I'd probably take the last page because it almost is like the whole story kind of recap. The guy facing the border patrol, and thinking about the aliens.
For me, I got to go with the splash because that's the best John Workman page. So I got to go in for that logo, that story title.
Yeah, that is fantastic. Last page too. With the whole, I really think because like Tommy Lee Edwards get referenced or not, can sometimes look a little too stiff, and I don't think that there's any stiffness in here. It's really dynamic storytelling.
Yeah, this feels organic. Yeah,
I like it.
Excerpt from 1989's David Anthony Kraft's Comics Interview number 68, Aliens cover feature, a Madcap interview with Phantom writer Mark Verheiden and Aliens artist Mark Nelson. They called me up and said, look, we're optioning for Aliens. Would you be interested in doing it? Comics Interview. Did you see the movies? Nelson. Yeah. Interview. Did you like them? Nelson. Nah. Laughter. Yeah, of course I like them. The first one is just tremendous. It's probably the best horror movie ever made. The second one is pretty much solid action from the word go. So you've got two different kinds of things. Yeah, each movie is a different entity. Everybody always asks me which movie I liked better, but each movie is a different thing. If you're in the mood for the real tense horror movie, then the first one is tremendous. If you want slam bam, whack 'em up, slap 'em down, shoot 'em up action, then the second one is the best. Interview. So okay, now we're at this crucial juncture. Did you guys ever meet, talk to each other? Were you even aware of each other's existence? Nelson. I would call Aliens the beginning for me, almost a project from hell. Laughter. It was supposed to be announced in August. I had done the intro artwork, and it was supposedly going to be announced at the con last year. And actually didn't get started writing the script until what? Mark Verheiden. October, November, Nelson. And I didn't see anything until almost February. Verheiden. There was basically, I don't know if there was a problem or anything, but I think negotiations with Fox, this just happens. This is not a negative. I don't want to present it as a negative, but the negotiations took a while to firm up, as things do in this way. Also, I'm not privy in the actual negotiations. I can't be sure, but I'm sure there's some reticence on Fox's part with going with a company like Dark Horse as opposed to a DC or a Marvel. But my understanding was they saw what Dark Horse was doing and really got behind the Dark Horse mood, or whatever Dark Horse does, and decided to give them a shot. Nelson. Yeah, independents have always been, what do I want to say so all the people at DC and Marvel don't want to cut our heads off and stuff them full of garlic and bury them apart from the other parts of our body? Laughter. My problem is that a lot of people look at my work. The comment has always been made, your work is not commercial. You had that problem too, trying to fit me into some sort of niche or something that would work with the kind of visuals in what I do. Interview. What are you doing with the book? I mean, the book is fairly popular, but there are probably quite a few people who have not picked it up, thinking they saw the movie. What do they need with this comic book? Are you adapting the movies? Continuing the movies? What exactly are you doing with it? Mark Verheiden. We're not adapting the movies. When I got into the project, I made it clear that I wasn't particularly interested in doing an adaptation. I'm not saying I will never do adaptations, but in this case, I said, look, if it's not a new story, if it's not something new, what's the point? Plus, I think they've already been adapted, so why bother? The idea going with it was, let's do a new story. Let's come up with something that we feel comfortable with and that Fox feels comfortable with. So around October of 87, I started working on an outline that we did give to Fox, which they did approve, and which we're sticking to fairly closely. Not 100%, but pretty close. They were very happy with it. I might say right here, they had very little problems. People have this image bunch of big movie studios just butchering everything they ever do. That's been my experience in my movies, laughter. But on this project, Fox has been extremely supportive. In fact, has given me the kind of latitude that writers dream about. Nelson. And artistically, they've been really good too. They're really concerned about the aliens looking like aliens, but we've been able to introduce new things. Veerheiden. I think if you look at past efforts to adapt the movies, not to put them down, but I think Mark's version of the aliens by far is certainly the closest graphic representation of those creatures you're going to see. Nelson. Thank you, Giger. Laughter. Veerheiden. Thank you, HR. And I hope the stories are the kind of thing that are jumping off from the films, but not just slavishly copying the films. Veerheiden. I think the aliens are probably about as bright as reasonably bright dogs, like a dog or a cat. If there's food inside a building and there's a way to get in through a duct or through a tunnel or through some hole in the wall, they'll find it. I mean, they're not stupid, but they wouldn't use the doorknob except by accident. To me, they're about that bright. So the aliens have all this power, and there's millions of them. It's a pretty vicious critter when cornered. Interview. How long can you sustain this kind of thing? Can you keep finding stories and aliens preying upon humans and humans fighting back? Nelson. Well, as far as I'm concerned, we're doing a 6-issue miniseries that's one story that has a beginning, middle, and an end, period. Whether we take it from there or not, I haven't really thought about. Veerheiden. When the time comes, that's a river we'll cross. Another thing that I want to bring up, a lot of people have gotten preconceived ideas of what they feel an alien should be, what this story should be, what that should be. I think the thing that you have to do is look at the book and say, this is one person's idea of what we can do with these things. I think there's a lot of difference between a subjective and objective criticism. You know what I mean? I've read a lot of criticism on the book and everyone goes, wonderful art, but the story should be like this person should be like this person should be like that. Well, that's fine. But on the other hand, I think you have to stop and say, okay, this is the way that Mark perceives it. Let's proceed along those tracks. Give it a break, you know? People just jump to conclusions too quickly. I walked into this project knowing there's a possibility of that happening, but I had no idea how big Aliens is in some people's minds. How important. Nelson. On the first cover, someone called me up and said I drew the aliens wrong. I go, what do you mean? Well, you know, the second thumb is not on the cover and they only have one thumb. You know, that kind of thing. You know, you kind of say to yourself, well, I guess every alien is just alike, just as every human being looks alike. We all look exactly alike. But it's that whole thing. If you go and you look at the first movie and get the pictures and look at the alien and how Giger developed it, when you look at the second movie, the arms are different. They lost the thorn on the elbow. So I tend to go and adapt both. I go and I pick out the pieces I like. And people come up and say, how come you're not using the rifles that were in the movie? It's because you want to add some of your own ideas a little bit. It's 10 years later. Maybe technology might advance a little bit. They might develop a different rifle or come up with a whole different unit. Someone wrote in and said Hicks's hair is white in the comic book, but it was brown in the movie. Well, it's a black and white comic book. Laughter. You know, Newt's hair is dark in the comic book, but it was light in the movie. Well, how many kids do you know when they're small, they have light hair, and as they get older, their hair gets darker? So, I mean, there are criticisms that I think are valid criticisms, and then I think there are criticisms where people are just trying to nitpick. Veerheiden. There are some other criticisms that to me actually kind of speak to, there was one I couldn't believe, to this worldview some people have, that I just do not subscribe to whatsoever. One guy was saying, or suggesting, that Hicks shouldn't have mental problems because by then they will have a pill you can take and no one will have mental problems. Laughter. And at the same time, we had a person who complained that Newt at 18 is this scarred up, creeped out girl because, hey, she was this tough survivor when she was 8 years old, running around keeping alive from the aliens. Well, you don't think that would scar up an 8-year-old girl a little bit? You don't think that might play some role in her development? That she might be a little bit screwed up from that? And she's being drugged by people who are giving her a pill they should have given Hicks, I guess? That speaks to this faith in technology that I find appalling. Some people seem to think, soapbox time, that you can run the earth into the gutter and some scientist is going to invent some machine that's going to make it all better. You know, if you have acid rain and mental problems, science is going to rescue us? Aliens is absolutely not about that. Aliens, in my view, is that science is not going to rescue us. We have to rescue ourselves. Science is not going to come up with the pill or the secret machine or the box or the tool that's going to rescue you. I hope they do. That would be great. That would solve a lot of problems. But to criticize them from that point of view is just absurd. Nelson. It's just like when people watch a movie and they stop somewhere and say, well, if I would have done it, I just say, boy, now there's a really intelligent critic. They're leaving out the basis of what criticism ought to be about, an objective look, when they run around doing these little subjective things. It's like the old attitude, there's two ways of doing things. There's my way and the wrong way. I think that's the really sad thing, especially in comics. Interview. So do you guys have any regrets? Veerheiden. I don't have any. Things are going pretty well. Mark Nelson probably regrets a lot of things. Nelson. But Aliens is an enormous seller. Even if everyone hates it, we can laugh all the way to the bank.
All right, well, I feel bad because it's like, hey, remember that thing? No.
So did you ever come up with your little fantasy aspect?
Well, I've got something, so if you want to do it, we can do it. It's just a silly bit.
You don't have to do it. I mean, if you want to do a bit, you can. I mean, I'm literally just saying, I'll put that, I'll incorporate that into your artwork. So if you want to do a bit, I'll throw the bit in there too, but it's not necessary.
Well, you can ask, and then you do with cut it, use it, whatever. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, I already asked you earlier, so you can just give me the answer, and I'll cut it together.
Give me a prompt.
Okay, I don't know.
I bet
Assholes with
I
all
bet they hear
thumbs. That's all I
Frank.
want to see. What's going on? What you doing? Do you want to go ahead and do the Gray Morrow story next to get the two shorts out of the way?
Oh, God. This one is, I think it feels like it's longer.
There's a lot of captions that probably contributes to the length, but also the fact that we were talking about how there was an organic quality to the Darko Macan story. This is about as inorganic as you get. This is definitely trying to shoehorn something into another thing. It's a turducken of a story. According to Mike's Amazing World of Comics, there's conflicting sources about when Dark Horse Presents Annual 1997 came out, per an edition of Comic Buyer's Guide and a house ad for Tarzan number 15, as well as the preview's catalog, is supposed to be out on September 10th, 1997. Several editions later, Comics Buyer's Guide said it would actually be out the last day of 1997. And then yet another edition of Comic Buyer's Guide states that it was released on February 25th, 1998, which was backed up by Usenet and Comic List, and also ultimately the Dark Horse website states February 25th, 1998 for the annual 1997. This station copy reads, The Return of Jason Pearson's Body Bags, Aliens by Beau Smith and Gray Morrow, a collaboration between Madman's Mike Allred and Land of Nod's Jay Stevens, the world's first comic strip by Penn Jillette of the comedy duo Penn and Teller, all this plus the amazing talent of Mark Verheiden, Chris Marinin, Andrew Pepoy, Renee French, John Arcudi, Scott Musgrove, and Paul Pope. It'll keep you up at night and caffeinate you in the morning. Editor Jamie S. Rich, designer Carrie Grazzini, cover artist Jason Pearson. Black and white, cover price $4.95. That's in the US. Canadian price was $6.95. For some reason, Diamond listed Dark Horse Presents Annual 1997 under trade paperbacks and graphic novels. It was the number 2 ranking one in units, 5th in dollars, behind Batman Mask, which I believe was done by Mike Grell, and the hardcover Life Story of the Flash. It also beat out the Witchblade Deluxe Collected Edition, Death the Time of Your Life softcover, Sonic the Hedgehog Firsts, yada yada yada. There's unfortunately no units listed for the trade paperbacks here. Xenopedia offers another publisher's summary, so I'm wondering if perhaps this was from maybe one of the Aliens omnibuses. It was featured in the 6th edition. On a themed planet designed to mimic life in the Old West, a frontier town is beset by a horror unimagined in the days of cowboys and outlaws. Limited by 19th century technology and weapons, the play-acting tourists will learn the code of the West or die.
It's a 12-pager, and I was trying to figure out how to talk about this, and I think I've got it. My only concern is that I'm going to make it sound more appealing than it is.
Well, it's kind of Westworld being invaded by the xenomorphs.
Well, I was going to say it's Aliens versus Little House on the Prairie, and the prairie wins.
Yeah.
So how in the heck, if that sounds good, then maybe this is for you.
Well, I mean, there is a sense of them, like, it feels like they did a Western story that was actually set in the 1800s, and either the licensor or Dark Horse said, no, we can't do that. We can't have aliens on Earth in the Old West. It seems like the captions are doing a retcon. It's kind of reminding me of, like, in the old Silver Age Marvel comics when Jack Kirby clearly had a Nazi killing or being killed, and Sam would go in there and say, oh, no, he shot the buttons off the guy's shirt. He didn't actually kill that person. This feels very much like, oh, we're going to do a Western alien story. It's like, no, we're not. And in the last few pages, they do bring in some stuff that's anachronistic, but for like 10 of those 12 pages, it's just like straight up Old West time, gonna get our 6-shooters and shoot us some aliens.
Yes. And I don't know.
And I have to point out before I forget that this story also has hand-lettered story title, That Ain't John Workman Doing That Work. This is, I feel like maybe the artist or maybe even the writer did that, because I really don't feel like a professional letterer would have produced this particular piece of work.
Yeah, see that.
Give me an hour or so. I think I could do better with it. And this is it's credited to John Costanza. I expect better from John Costanza. I feel like somebody must have pasted that in there and then he took the blame.
Yeah, or he had an intern do it or something.
Right. The assistant editor came in at the last minute. We need a story title in here. Yeah.
I don't even think I've got anything. I mean, it doesn't seem like it's an alien story, like in Borderline, it wasn't, it was a human story, right? It was like with aliens as the backdrop. And in this one, it didn't need to be alien. And I think it suffers because it is the xenomorph aliens, because you shouldn't be able to just have a bunch of, not even cowboys. It's in the context of the story of it's the Remington Corporation's holiday planet. It's tourists pretending to be cowboys. cowboys who fight these aliens and win, and if it was a Little House on the Prairie episode where, one of the families are struggling and then the rest of the families all pitch in and they save the farm, or they, run the con man out of town, or whatever the heck, that'd be one thing. But if it's a bunch of tourists pretending to be cowboys fighting xenomorphs with, I think it's just shovels and stuff. I don't even think, it's not even like the one guy has a 6-shooter. Yeah, pitchfork, hammer. Yeah, they're fighting him with farming implements and they're winning. Oh, I mean, if you want to see cowboys not have a problem with aliens, this is the story for you.
Well, okay, so this was in Dark Horse Presents Annual 1997. And I know, there's a 64-page annual, $5 cover price. This thing was intent to be sold on the bloody breasts of Panda from Body Banks, and anything else was just going to be gravy. And I'm looking at the creative teams. You got Jason Pearson, of course. You've got a new American story by Vera Hayden and Chris Marinan. Neither one of those guys were working all that much in that time period. You've got a story by John Arcudi and Scott Musgrove, who I'm not familiar with. You've got Penn Jillette, of all people, doing a story. And you've got an effort combining Jay Stevens and Mike Allred. You've got a Paul Pope story. So this is not like a nothing book. These are known people for the most part. But I do think there was an element of, it's 1997, the industry has collapsed, and it's like trying to get people stuff to do, it seems like. And in the case of Gray Morrow in particular, I'm sure that, Beau Smith was still a kind of a mover at this point in time. I think he was still working for Todd McFarlane, doing his marketing and maybe doing some editing and stuff as well. Beau Smith hadn't been doing a lot of writing by this point. I think by this time, he'd been mostly finished up with his work at DC. I think he was still co-writing some stuff with Chuck Dixon. Like, I think he did the Wildcats, Batman, Wildcat, Catwoman miniseries. Was still doing some stuff, but he wasn't really like making his bones as a writer at this point. I think he was still just like a guy who did stuff for McFarlane. So I have to feel like they were just trying to find something for Gray Morrow to do. They couldn't get them to sell a Western story, so let's do a Western story with the aliens in it. That'll be enough to sell. Gray Morrow does some very nice bison here, and then as soon as he starts doing the xenomorphs, it's pretty rough. Most of the basics are there, but you don't get a sense that this man has a passion for drawing aliens. And actually, I like Gray Morrow, and I made a point before we got together. I pulled out a hardcover I've got of his stuff, a Gray Morrow Visionary, and it features a lot of his paintings. He did movie posters. He's a guy who's very much a science fantasy dude. You can tell that he grew up on Alex Raymond, and he definitely is in that Flash Gordon vein. And Aliens was like a conscious counterpoint to that type of science fiction, science fantasy, and it's not Gray Morrow's lane. You can tell that he's having way more fun drawing cat house girls and 6-shooters and horses, and then when it comes to the aliens, it really feels like an afterthought. And as you pointed out, if you're taking any account to aliens lore, it doesn't make any sense that these pea shooters and farm implements were going to do anything to them. So it was clearly just, let's get Gray Morrow some work. And this is 97. He's gone by 2001, if I recall correctly. I don't know when he got the Parkinson's diagnosis, but I know that by the end he could not draw at all anymore. And I do think that there's maybe a little bit of loss of ability even present in this story. I think it's still pretty solid. I think that most of the elements in the story he still draws well. There's a few rough patches here and there, but it's mostly just down to him not having a real aptitude for the xenomorphs themselves. But it definitely feels like busy work. This doesn't feel like something that anybody had a great passion for. I think that Beau Smith had an opportunity to get Gray Morrow to draw something for him, and ideally he would have done a Western, and they couldn't sell that, so it was a net Western with aliens in it. And you can just tell that this is very fanish, this is very fanficky, this is very, let's reverse engineer this Western story I had in mind to make it fit into something commercial, but it's not any great work. It's not some lost masterpiece of Gray Morrow. And as you mentioned, it does recall the Gene Colan piece that he did with Marv Wolfman, where you can just tell that somebody was getting this guy a paycheck. Like, this guy had a shortfall on Social Security or something, and they gave him a job to help make up the difference.
Yeah, and I'm for Gray Morrow artwork. I appreciate it, and I appreciate the circumstances where an aging artist, just might need the work. But I also think that you should, in a situation like that, you should give the artists work that will make people either remember why they're great or show like a new generation why they're great. You know what I mean? No aliens person is gonna pick this up and go, oh my God, who's this Gray Morrow guy? I need to find out more about him.
Yeah, I mean, that's ideal if you can have that kind of showcase. But I mean, it literally, I feel like I'm looking at this, I feel like this is a paycheck gig. I think this is like, we can't just donate money to you. You're gonna have to do something for the money, but we're gonna make sure that you've got pages to draw. So I really don't think this was some kind of high-minded, I can't wait to have the showpiece. I'm sure that Beau Smith isn't like, man, that's the story I wanted to have Gray Morrow draw. But probably it's a combination of I had the opportunity to get Gray Morrow to draw a story for me, and I got to work with him and he read my script and stuff. I'm sure that was part of it. But I think I can't imagine this is anything but Gray Morrow needs some money. Let's get him some pages to draw.
Yeah. I'm sure that's how it worked out. There's horses there that look fantastic. Every panel
they put a real nice
great.
zipatone on that bowler and over that guy's eyes on that one panel,
Yeah, but it's not my favorite Alien comic I've ever read.
Yeah, or your favorite Gray Morrow.
Seems very
work.
insubstantial. Yeah, no, not at all.
There's a thing that happened because somebody, needed it to happen. Simple as that.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been cool. Like, I mean, even if it was more about like the security forces having a problem with the people, because there weren't a ton of aliens in Borderline. It was mostly the conflict was in between the humans, right? Like if there was a story where it was the conflict-driven thing and the aliens were in the periphery, driving the conflict or something like that, it could have been something cool, and it could have been something that people would look at and go, "God dang, Gray Morrow! Look at he nailed it." It could have been something cool.
And let's be honest. I mean, I really enjoyed at least a chunk of Beau Smith's run on Guy Gardner Warrior. I was amused by his swaggering persona. He did editorials for various places. I think he was like either Heroes Illustrated or Overstreet Fan or something. He had a column with them and stuff. I was amused by the whole persona and everything. But Beau Smith isn't a guy with like huge range. I don't think he has the versatility to be able to mash up these two things properly. I think it's one of these deals where he didn't have an alien story in him, so he did a Western story and they just stuck the aliens in there. So I think part of that, it's easy to hit on Gray Morrow for this, but also he's working off somebody else's script, and the script really wasn't there either. So this might have been a thing where, look, we need to churn out 8 pages to fill out this annual. Somebody didn't show up for us. We don't care if it's any good, just get it done. On both counts, this was not the finest hour. This is not Beau Smith's best work either.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of, if I was going to point fingers, it would be with the writing, especially because at the end they tried to do the cowboy thing where he's like, your politics or your red tape, I don't have any time for this, I'm a cool cowboy, see you later. But he's not a cool cowboy. He's a tourist guide on this tourist planet who works for the same people that he's telling off. He has this like, I don't have time for you and this nonsense.
Yeah, I could have called you guys in, but I had to act fast to save these people. I didn't have time for all that kind of stuff. Yeah. The man's politics comes into the play, and that's not helping anything either. I mean, I don't share his politics. Whatever. We're already giving the story too much thought, I would say.
Yeah.
And he's just trying way too hard to make Tom Siringo, range foreman, happen. There's so many anonymous characters in these alien stories, and that we make sure to let us know that, no, this is a Tom Siringo story. It's like, dude, stop trying to make Tom Siringo happen. It's not going to happen.
Yeah, no. I mean, I think to do something like Borderlines where the people are fighting each other and the aliens are around, you get a much more compelling story. You get Gray Morrow to his heart's in it a little bit more, maybe, and just everybody wins.
Well, just a simple fact, like you said, they're going at these things with hatchets and shovels, and it's like, I'm just picturing all these guys with their feet melting off and their hands melting off. Like, this is, nobody was committed to the lore on this deal. This was all about just like, let's knock out this thing, get the rent paid.
And that splash page where they're all hitting the alien with the axes, figure work on that is crazy. It's great. But I mean, I don't know if we're doing the pick a page of this one. I don't know if I want the one where it's, even though it's the best looking page, that splash, I don't know if it makes any sense to say I would want that page.
Well, I can definitely say that I'm actively avoiding any pages with a xenomorph on it, so it's kind of tricky.
Yeah.
I mean, the one with the close-up of the guy's eyes when he's riding into town and there's no xenomorphs on the page, that's probably a good pick. Because I like the bison. I would have liked the bison page, but those awful aliens at the bottom, I could do without. So I guess I'm going to go with the page where we get the zipatone. I already indulged in my lettering fetish. Let's indulge in my zipatone fetish and just do the full one page where it's just full-on Western.
Yeah. I guess I would take that. I don't know if it's the facing page on your thing, but the title page, I guess. Oh, it does have that awful.
that lettering. Yeah, Aliens tourist season. Yeah, but it's a nice horse, and I bet you that because this is all pencil. I don't think there's much in the way of ink on this. I think this is all just pencil with contrast. That's going to look really nice on the page. You're going to really get to see a lot of extra texture having that in hand versus essentially a photocopy.
Yeah.
Like I'm sure, like there's some dust impression you can see on the page that I bet you looks really awesome in hand.
Yeah.
Oh, and you do have a robot horse back there. I missed that on reading it. Okay, so there is those little indications that this is a sci-fi story. It's just you kind of have to look for them.
Oh, yeah. That must be, because I was looking at it later. There's another panel where I think there's a panel where I'm like, that looks like a robot horse. Oh, it's where on the previous page where the aliens are. So that horse gets knocked down on the previous page. I was kind of looking at it. Okay, that kind of looks like
it's kind of hard to tell in black and white. You have to kind of stop for a minute there and look. Yeah, that it's a robot horse, but I think I'd already started to check out this was page 3 or 4. I think I was already starting to check out on this one, so I wasn't taking note of it at the time.
The human figures on that page are great.
Mm-hmm. Well, it occurs to me looking at it, a robot Gray Morrow horse looks like a regular Gil Kane one.
That is accurate. That is highly accurate. It's funny. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I'd go with that. I'd still take that title page, even though it has the awful lettering on there.
Well, what do you want to be? What are you? What are you in this universe? Who do you think you are?
Well, see, here's where the difference is between what I want to be versus who I probably am. So, like, I want to be badass Marine, right? But if I was, I'm probably more like Bill Paxton whining. But realistically, I'm probably like Newt's parents. Totally dead. Went in, got wiped out early. So that's probably where I fall.
I don't know. Traveling, all the traveling you do, all the corporate work you do, you might be a Burke.
Dude, I stick my nose in situations all the time, and in that case, it would get bit off.
But as far as expanded media, action figures, novels, I know you're more of a novel guy than a lot of the other folks I talked to. You didn't touch any of that stuff.
I never did. I was tempted, though, because I would see the Aliens books in the store, and I was like, how do you do this as a book? And I'm sure there's a lot of psychological aspect to it, which probably makes it great. I did have a couple of the action figures. I think they're from the Aliens 3 line. One was the Scorpion alien that you press a button in his back and all the parts burst apart. Because, it wasn't Aliens 3 when they started breeding with other animals, so the alien would look different.
Yeah, they went nuts with that premise. They loved that, and very toyetic.
Yeah, so it was definitely the Scorpion, because the idea was it's an alien bred with a scorpion, so I had like a scorpion tail and all that stuff. But I had a couple of those. But no, mainly for me, my expanded universe was the comics, because I was just getting into comics. I started reading comics at age 12. Then as I got to age 15, I was like, I got to read Independence. And at that point, Dark Horse, I could call it independent. It was really number 3 in the race, truthfully, but compared to Marvel and DC. But yeah, so when they got the Aliens license, I got on board and I was pretty excited about it.
And how early did you get into that? Because one of the things I like to talk about is I would always see like the Mile High Comics or New England Comics would have the little ad in their list of the books, the hot books and stuff. Mm-hmm. And I lusted after that book, and I didn't have access to a comic shop back then, so I didn't get to see it then. It took me a few years into them doing Alien stuff before I even had a chance to read that stuff. Where did you come in on the comic books, and how deeply did you invest in that material?
In 1988. Is that the year the first series came out? I believe it is.
Sounds right. I think it was a couple of years after the movie, yeah.
So I was in Hawaii visiting my dad, because my dad was living there for a little while. I would go hop on the city bus, go all the way across town in Honolulu without anybody, just on my own, in a town I didn't even know, to go to a comic book shop called Jellies. And this comic shop was awesome. And they had, I want to say, and this is kind of off the top of my head, so forgive me, I want to say the first series had just finished coming out, the first 6-issue miniseries, because I got my hands on second printings. And I was so excited to find it because I'd heard about them. It was black and white. It was edgy. The art was amazing. I just totally loved it. I got so into it because, again, I was reading at that age, X-Men. I was reading Firestorm. I was reading brightly colored superhero comics. So to find something this dark where I knew the world already, it's not like I had to learn the world building. It was super exciting for me. So I bought those. Series 2 came out, which was a 4-issue limited series. I bought those not too long after that. So they would have been reprinting the first one, reading the second one, and I stuck with it for a while. I had to look at my list to reference it. I'm going to rattle off names because I did tail off after a while. I read Aliens, the second Aliens, Aliens Earth War, Genocide, Sacrifice, a lot of Dark Horse Presents with them, Aliens versus Predator when that first one came out. And then years later, I picked up Superman versus Aliens, which I thought was very good. And then when I worked at the comic shop from 92 to 96, I would sample various Alien series that came out. It started to feel a little repetitive for a while, so I stopped stopped buying them, but like I'd pick it up, I'd flip through it, I'd read it, whatever. So for me, it may not sound like a lot, but that's, that's a good 20 comics, 20, 30 comics, and I was really passionate about them at the time.
Yeah, what I'm hearing is I should have talked to you a hell of a lot sooner.
Yeah, I can't tell you anything about the stuff came later. Yeah. I don't have a clue.
And also, I'm right there with you too, because I'm at the period now where I'm late into the material where you were getting to 94, 95 or so, and the formula is pretty well set for the comics, where you're seeing the same tropes over and over again, and it's getting a little tough to get through the material as a result of that. And I'm just trying to power my way through to the crossovers, because once you introduce Superman and Batman in the mix, it gets interesting again.
Right. Yeah. That Superman versus Aliens was really good. Like, I didn't expect anything of it, and then somebody somewhere had told me it was good, so I tried it out, and I was really impressed with it. I really enjoyed it. They had some very clever ideas. Have you read it yet, Superman versus Aliens?
I scanned it when it was coming out, because I think that was when I had shops. I never sat down and actually full-on read it, but obviously, anytime you've got Kevin Nolan involved in a project, and especially with Aliens are also involved, that's something I want to at least skim through. But I never properly read it all the way through, just like bits and pieces, mostly just thumbing through it, to be honest with you. Maybe reading a few dialogue pieces here and there, checking to make sure Supergirl's not coming back, right? No, not for real, not for real.
Well, the clever hook on that one is Superman's trapped under, it's either like a red sun or an orange sun, so he's not at full power, which is the reason he's not able to just plow through the aliens. And so it actually made a struggle, and I really enjoyed it. There's I'll share one thing that's always stuck out in my head I'm pretty sure it's the very first Aliens miniseries, and you probably would know this more than me because I haven't read them in 30 years again. But there's this great throwaway one-liner where a couple of regular guys, they're on Earth, or maybe it's a colony, but they're coming out of like a dance club, and they're like, wow, I haven't heard industrial noise like that since the 80s, or because it's supposed to be the far future. And on the wall, there's like a poster that talking about, and I'm going to say this name wrong, I'm Sturgeon to know about. It's like a joke about 1990s. They're supposed to be visiting like a 1990s retro show, even though the comic, is coming out in like 88 or whatever. And for whatever reason, I guess because my friends were into industrial music, that has stuck with me all these years. I can't tell you a single thing other than what happened in the comic other than that.
I think it was either the first miniseries, which at this point I've been doing this podcast for a few years now, so I probably would need to revisit it. It was either the first miniseries, or it might have actually been one I just recently covered called The Music of the Spears, which was all about music and the recording industry and stuff. And they had a number of industry gags in there. So one of the two, I suspect.
Was not Music of the Spheres. I didn't hang around that long.
Didn't make it that far. Okay, so it was probably the very first one. There was a lot of clever bits like that.
Yeah.
Veer Hayden was just working at a different level when he was doing that first miniseries.
It was so beautiful.
So tell me this. I know you probably haven't ever revisited any of that material. Do you recall any particular highlights? Like one of the miniseries that particularly stood out? One of the writers, one of the artists? Was somebody just particularly good at the aliens and you always remembered that sort of thing?
Unfortunately, at that point, I wasn't paying attention to the artists, so I couldn't tell you even who drew any of them. But I will say that at the point where I was reading up to there, I don't remember there being a single bad artist. I remember the coloring on the second miniseries, I think is when they went from black and white to color, if I've got that right, was stunning. Dark Horse was doing something.
Well, that was actually painted, so that was Din Beauvais fully painted. I think doing airbrushing on that one.
It was gorgeous. The colors just sang in that thing. It was just beautiful, which would explain if it was all painted. That was beautiful. That sticks out in my mind. I liked it. There was some storylines involving, there was an alien king at one point. I remember that story kind of like caught my attention, at least the very concept of it. I remember a lot to do with royal jelly, but it really becomes blurry. And there was a rinse repeat thing. It was like, okay, there's a colony. An egg or two gets found, and what's going to happen? And it did get a bit repetitive after a while, but that's, again, it's so hazy. What is that, 35 years now? So yeah.
Well, and again, I've read them in recent years, and even I start to blur on them after a while because of the repetitive elements. I believe the one you were referencing is Rogue. I believe that was the one that had the king in it, and that was I think Ian Edgington and Will Simpson.
Oh wow, what a team! Interesting.
Yeah. They had some great people. I mean, Sam Keith did the book, and when you're talking about Din Beauvais, I was at a horror convention over the weekend, and one of the tables had shirts that was Beauvais's cover for, I think, the trade paperback, where it's just an extreme close up on a drone with the dripping saliva, and they'd rendered it all in like a fluorescent green, so it sort of had that computer screen quality to it. I came close. I didn't end up buying that one because they had the same green for the famous poster for Return of the Living Dead, and that's the one I had to have. So, but it was very striking, and I did quite like it. And I did get a Predator shirt, but it was for somebody else. So nice, but lots of fluorescent colors, like extra pop art kind of aspect to it. So it's comic art, and then they add the pop art coloring to it on top of it. So it was very vibrant, very cool.
It's sort of amazing, and you've probably talked about this on your show. It's just that Dark Horse Comics got to Aliens versus Predator before anyone else, right? Because obviously Predator hinted at it in the second Predator movie, I think it was, that there was some connection there. But Dark Horse led the way here, and they had to have made a ton of money off that. Now I don't know if the movies have to pay them any royalty for the name or anything like that, but way to go, Dark Horse.
It would have been the #1 book of that month if Todd McFarlane's Spider-Man #1 hadn't come out the same month.
Oh,
yeah.
Todd!
So, yep. It's a situation. Not only would it have been it was still the biggest independent comic book up to that point, but they would have been #1 except for Todd. The Todds are just drowning them out with all those Spider-Man variant covers and stuff.
I can't believe it beat radioactive adolescent black belt hamsters. That's shocking.
So that's actually it. That's the whole thing. Ajay Manwar, Altcoin Daily, Anna Adams, Anti-Wife Equation, Marvel's Pip, who added, cool, we'll listen. Ash Crypto, under 3 separate accounts. Welcome to X 2025, right? Between the Pages blog, Billy Hines, Comics Enabler, Captain Entropy, Chris Dunford, The Comic Crush, Crypto Rover, Dave's Comic Heroes blog, DC Dave, Del Dracula, DJ, Dirk Ashton, Edmore Teal Productions, Eva Sanatha, Fabricio Martins, Fernando Rodriguez, Gas 55555, Gregory Litchfield, Hal Kolbeck, History of Comics on Film, The Irredeemable Shagg, JMT Productions, Julia Raoul, Keith G. Baker, King Dinosaur, Kirk Spencer, Secretary of Comic Books, Lamar the Revenger, Martin Kessler, Michael, Mikey Crotty, Mike is almost sure he exists, Miracle Man, Relatively Geeky Podcast Network, Renierg, Siskoid, Superbound, That Old Comic Smell, Time for Tubes, Twins Are Rising, Volcan Singos, Wayu Priyo Utomo, William Voyage, and Yenza Morgenstar, the 108th Sage.
This has been a Rolled Spine podcast. All audio samples are believed covered under fair use laws. No copyright infringement is intended.
But anyway, that's done. I'm gonna turn off the Evayer.
All right. I hope some of that's useful.
No, it's entirely useful. I'm gonna use every stitch of it. Coming in March, Dark Horse presents Aliens vs. Predator, Eternal, with guest Captain Entropy.